IFG, more like I'm fucking going on holiday because. So this is a bit weird because I am recording this very, very in advance before even the next build showcase you're going to see, which is a driller one and hopefully it's a cryo cannon one. I don't know yet. We'll see. Either way, so yeah, when you're watching this, I am. If you are seeing this, I am dead. If you get the reference, I love you. Basically, I'm on holiday right now. Not while recording this though. While you're watching it, I'm in the Grande Le France, the place of the disgusting piss and cigarettes. But you know, we've got to put a couple things out. I'll be back for that Saturday, or guess this Saturday in that case. Which I'm not sure if that's going to be. I need to talk to Tyler about that. But we know that we're going to try on Thursday, assuming that's when the experimental branch launches and therefore the Season 4 trailer is premiered. We're hoping to figure out a way that we can at least record a reaction to the trailer, at least. And then, of course, that should, assuming it is, that brings with it the experimental branch release. We should be able to look at the patch notes, although I am considering saving that for Saturday, so I don't have to do it with shitty audio from across from in a different country, you know. Either way, today though I'm recording a Overclock Workshop. It's about the Scouts IFG, the Scouts first grenade, and honestly, I actually love the IFGs. I think the IFGs are awesome. It's still. See, here's the thing: the boomerang, the stun sweeper, has sort of taken over as maybe my favourite Scout grenade. But the IFG might still be the one that I actually think is the best because I think it has the most use case scenarios, right? I respect the love for both the cryo grenade and the sunsweeper, especially in relation to Macteras. But I think Scout's weapons are generally quite good against Macteras, and I think IFGs present a lot of amazing use cases for taking down large groups of enemies as well as setting up larger enemies to be taken down more easily. Something which I don't think either of the other two really have. The Praetorians, absolutely. But, you know, oppressors and any kind of bosses, that's where IFGs shine, where the other two can't really do anything, unfortunately. I'm a big IFG lover, and, you know, I've talked about what the Overclock Workshop kind of is now, or at least in relation to the grenades and tools. So I hope that you understand what this kind of is by now. I'm not really suggesting straight up overclocks. In fact, I'm more so just suggesting modifications. Things that could potentially be added even to the base grenades, that's even a possibility, in the form of the hypothetical additions of overclocks or just normal gear modifications to grenades. It's sort of all-encompassing. Any given way that these ideas could be added, I will consider and try and optimize them for what I think is most reasonable to actually be added. So we'll start with the clean that I came up with, which is called Tissue Softener. Apparently IFG is actually an acronym for in your face. So, enemies affected by the IFG take further bonus damage to weak points. Now, I thought this would be a fantastic modification. I think if you just made it say take increased damage from all sources even further, you might be sort of going a bit too far. That might be a bit too easy, or make things a bit too easy. I kind of like the idea it's also a bit more selfish too. Scout is the most focused on weak point damage modifiers or multipliers. Therefore, he would probably naturally get the most benefit out of this anyway. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that it's more so for him, and it would allow you to get some pretty intense damage, especially against larger targets. I think it promotes larger targets, using IFGs on larger enemies more so. Like a Betsy or a Corlock, I believe, where, well, obviously Dreadnoughts especially, that's something IFGs are good against, and this will make it even better because it's, you know, a single target. Then you have other bosses like Betsy, where they are weak points, the Parasites are weak points, or the Corlock, where I believe the Corlock Heart is a weak point. I'm not 100% sure. Now, it goes without saying that you can see why this would be useful. I guess it really comes down to why it should be a thing. And I you know, that's the kind of thing I can't really make a case for, like why it should exist. I can't really do that because, you know, I'm definitely not saying this should be a part of the base weapon. The base grenade, I think that's not a great idea, but I do think it, you know, it's still something that I would like to see, and I think it especially makes sense for Scout to get something that you know, Scout is just sort of inherent. He sort of dances on a line between selfish and support, type character, which I think is very interesting. And this would tip the scale slightly more favour of selfish, but not in a way that's actually going to hinder your team either. And I think that's quite interesting. Like I said, could be in the form of modification. Obviously, it's a clean overclock, so it kind of balances itself. I do think about the fact that, to really excuse grenades getting modifications or overclocks, you would need to see an overall increase in the difficulty of the game, I guess. But grenades are so out of the way of your overall kit. I think you can probably get away with it anyway, and it would just create an overall it would just elevate the complexity and variation you could have in your builds rather than actually making things too easy. I don't think it would do that. Can you imagine using this thing against a bolt detonator? You'd be popping those weak points so damn easily. It's awesome. So I think you can see why you might enjoy using tissue softener. And I'm not going to waste any more time on it. I think maybe you get the point, maybe you don't. I'm not too bothered. That's tissue softener. On to the balanced. Introducing Lockdown, which is the balanced one, like I just said. This encompasses a stronger slowdown effect and the ability to attach the IFG to enemies and dwarves, with a slightly reduced effect radius to compensate for the fact that, they're going to be more effectively kept within the radius itself by the slowdown, and the fact you can attach it to something. Now, I think that part of it is awesome, the ability to attach it to something, because like I talked about, one of the best use cases for IFGs is against boss enemies, but of course, boss enemies tend to move. They actually tend to be some of the quickest, except a Korlock for obvious reasons. But Dreadnoughts, if you had the ability to actually attach IFGs to the Dreadnoughts themselves, then the consistency against which you'd be able to have that IFG damage bonus against them would be upped by a lot. There's also in the mere fact that you could attach it to any given grunt. Ideally, you'd just attach it to the strongest enemy in a swarm, but it means it would be carried along with the swarm itself, and you would never actually lose it, Which is why sort of doubling up on the slowdown effect with that might be a bit too much. But I hope you can see maybe where you could take either of those things and make them your own modifications. The ability to stick the IFG to entities, I think, is quite important. For example, well, that's the enemies, but you could also maybe attach it to yourself or other dwarves, certainly. That would definitely help a driller. That would be kind of awesome. You could attach an IFD to a driller and he could just go to town, specifically with his drills. Or maybe with like the close range wave hooker overclock. Something like that would be pretty awesome. So this sort of this doesn't skate any kind of line. This leans a bit, I would say it leans ever so slightly more towards support, but it's still overall a neutral thing that Scout could very much use to its own benefit as well as the teams, if you're in a team scenario. I think its usefulness comes through pretty clearly, although it's like, which parts of it should be taken and maybe implemented on their own. And I would say the ability to attach it to things is something I would love to see. Now, could you get away with adding that to the base grenade? Maybe. It's probably the only thing here that you could. At the same time, you might need to just lock off dwarves, maybe just being able to attach it to enemies, and that is a thing, right? You sort of have something like the lead burster, which it kind of just bounces off enemies. It's a little bit confusing, but it probably shouldn't be able to be attached to enemies. Especially, you could say that especially about the proximity mines. But obviously we have sticky grenades, so it's something that exists in some form at least. And I think if any other grenade is going to get that, maybe the IFG is the one to get it. That's all I'm saying. And that's sort of like, that was the argument for if it could be implemented without introducing grenade modifications or overclocks. I think if we were to introduce grenade modifications or overclocks, then this has even more of an excuse to exist. Let's hope that happens someday. But that's the best case I can make for Lockdown. Although I am trying to think of any other really specific use cases. I mean, really just any... It'd just be useful in any priority target situation and any dense horde situation. I think like it's... Yeah, I think its usefulness is very, very clear. And I'm trying to think of any other possible examples. The thing about IFGs, you do have 6 of them. But something where they kind of fall apart is maybe robots a little bit. Shredders, that's probably not going to change. Certainly the only scout grenade that's really only good against Shredders is the Stun Sweeper. But we do have patrol bots. If you could attach an IFG to a patrol bot, that would make that a lot easier. But the only reason that's worth doing is because you do have 6 of them, right? But patrol bots in a lot of scenarios, especially if you're not on like a rival mission, if you just encountered a rival, like a robot event, then it would definitely be worth using your IFGs against the patrol bots. You could even stick it to a prospector to make that entire nonsense easier. So yeah, that's the case for lockdown. Onto the unstable, which would be probably a lot harder to make a case for, as you'll pretty immediately see the second you lay your eyes on it, or the second that you understand what I'm actually going for with it. Right, let's get to it. Introducing remote generator, which is just an insane idea that I'd somehow love to see implemented. It's the kind of idea that I feel like Deep Rock kind of skirts around a lot of the very typical upgrades that you might see in like RPGs or roguelites, but you know, that's not the type of game DRG is, so it doesn't necessarily necessitate this kind of thing. Still, let me explain. So, enemies killed while affected by the IFG will give you a small amount of shield. So it's sort of like a shield siphon from enemies that, you know, are in the IFG, but you have to kill them. You don't just gain shield just by shooting them. So it's like a remote shield-based vampire. Now, the idea of a shield-based vampire is something that I'm pretty damn attached to, right? I feel like it's something we're very likely to see in the next perk overhaul. I say perk overhaul because we know they want to look at perks at some point, and it's probably going to be Season 5. But what that encompasses, we don't really know. Overhaul will sort of encompass whether or not it's a rework, or they just add a few more, they adjust. We're pretty sure they're going to be adjusting how they use the perk points or the acquisition of them, something like that. But if we are going to get any new perks, I feel like it's very reasonable to expect something like a shield vampire. But if they did that, I would personally love it to function in a somewhat different way. Possibly have it rely on electricity in some way, maybe. Either way, definitely have it be less than vampire. Vampire at its best gives you 5. Shield should be like, you know, 1 or, you know, maybe 3 at most, and it should be based on a chance, maybe even, but it will be, you know, based on ranged attacks too. Enemies that you kill with your weapons will give you some shield or have a chance to. Maybe that is even needed for this one. Maybe we need to introduce an element of chance. Now, obviously, given that this is an unstable overclock, like, we have drawbacks such as a reduced slowdown effect, and it also reduces the weakening effect, as in it reduces the amount of bonus damage that you deal to enemies affected by the IFG. And also, it will apply these same effects, though, the slowdown, even if they are reduced in this case, it still applies to slowdown and weakening to you if you're in the IFG. Not that you should be in it, but then I had the idea, maybe that's how you balance it, right? You know? And then maybe that's how you balance it as a grenade, or at least as a modification. Obviously, this is the kind of thing where adding it to the base grenade is off the table, but it doesn't inherently have to be an overclock. And the reason why I'm sort of making this adjustment is because even though we don't have either grenade mods or overclocks, modifications are still more likely, only because I don't think Ghost Ship want to bloat the overclock pool with grenade overclocks, which is absolutely understandable. But the way you could do it in that sense would just be, you could even have it be a vampire thing. But what you would do is have it so that, yes, you get, you know, if you just ignore the penalties here, but let's say it's still something that could be stored within a weapon mod, something like it applying the weakening effect to you as well. You know, weapons can deal friendly fire damage to you. You can hurt yourself with the grenade launcher, for example, or the shard diffractor if you're using plastic catalyst. You can really hurt yourself. You can kill yourself with those weapons. That's not even upgrade or an overclock. So just having the grenade affect you as well, much like an incendiary grenade or any other grenade thrown at your feet would hurt you, the IFG can apply these same effects to you. But it also means that if you are in the radius though, then you will gain shield from hurting enemies. Maybe even just gain shield from being in it, but then that's sort of like a weird sort of pseudo shield generator. Either way, having the IFG be some form of shield vampire, whether that be, you know, ranged with a chance while you're outside it, or you just gain shield from every enemy kill as long as you're inside the radius, but obviously you are weakened and slowed down as well. I think there's a lot of interesting play there, and I couldn't really, certainly not in this moment, would I be able to land on a specific version of this. I would just lay it out and say I think there's a solid core concept here, and I think there was something like this for the previous one, for the Impact Acts, where I suggested something that doesn't even have to be for the IFG itself. You know, I talked about the perk, right? The Shield Vampire perk. I just think that idea of being able to siphon shield from enemies somehow, I think should make its way into the game somehow. And if that happens to be a perk that's for everyone, or just for the IFG itself, or for something completely separate, that's absolutely fine. I just think it's absolutely worth looking into, and the IFG is one of those items that you could give this effect to. You could use it as the platform for that mechanic. So I hope I at least made a decent case for that. But like I said, I won't be able to land on a specific ideal version of this overclock, so I'm just going to leave it there. And that's the end of the video. So I've already sort of been through this. There will be, the Overclock Workshop will not stop once I'm done with the grenades. I'm planning on actually going back to the weapons. Now, I'm still interested in doing Overclock reworks, assuming that there's still some pretty major outliers after Season 4. But, you know, the way that I sort of think about it is, you know, outliers, there's actually not very many at all. Overclocks I would like to see changed in some way, that's quite a long list. Even if I'm not necessarily right about them being too weak, there's still changes I'd like to see. So I might do a couple of miscellaneous episodes where I suggest changes to Overclocks I'd like to see for the given classes. That could be 4 separate videos, one for each class. But then I'm going to move on to just going back to square one and seeing how long I can keep up the Overclock Workshop with just making more Overclock ideas. Although I'm hoping by that point we will at least know the state of getting new Overclocks. Doesn't look like that's going to happen in Season 4. It's still possible. Maybe Season 5. But if Season 5 is devoted to perks, then probably not then. Which is why I do question how much Ghost Ship values Overclocks, even though I think they are exceptionally valuable pieces of content, because of the amount of variety they grant to the weapons themselves is invaluable, right? Weapons themselves bring so much gameplay variety, but the overclocks do a lot of that heavy lifting. And the ability to add more overclocks, just the idea of adding more overclocks to all the pre-existing weapons and breathing so much more life into them is objectively worth doing, not even just looking into. This is something they should be doing soon. I believe that, and I think I'm right about that. So I'd love to see it soon. Ghost Ship, I hope you're listening, and I hope you're working on this, because I really do believe it's one of the best pieces of content that you can add in terms of equipment without introducing anything new. Which is why I do sort of respect the Rocket Boots in a way of them trying their hand at something new. We'll see how far that goes. But yeah, anyways, that's all I've got time for. Well, I've got time for more, but there's no point hanging around still. So if you enjoyed this, please make sure to like, subscribe, ring that notification bell if you want to see more Overclock Workshops or whatnot. I don't care. You know, go get. You know what I usually say is like, go get yourself a treat or something. That's what I'd rather you do than click the bell, but it still helps, I guess. But you know, take care, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.